Hello friends! So today I've got my little cute mug here and I don't have coffee this time. I have some tea because it's the afternoon and I had my coffee this morning. But we are going to go ahead and I'm going to share my first ever canning projects with you here today. So my goal, we'll see if it happens, is to do two different things. So it's to can up some chicken broth in the pressure canner, and then also to pressure can some chicken soup out of the Ball Blue Book. So what we have here is a roaster pan that I have been simmering away since 9 o'clock on Thursday, 9 p.m. on Thursday, and today is Sunday, or Saturday, around 2 p.m. So it's been going for about 40 hours now. And in there, I just have some bones and chicken skin from some rotisserie chickens that I got from Sam's Club. And then a bunch of vegetable scraps that I had in the freezer, and also from the veggies that we're gonna use in the soup later on in the video. And so it's been cooking away with all the water and stuff, and I started that a couple days ago, like I said. And so I'm bringing you here now because we are going to go ahead and strain out the broth and can it up. And so we'll see how it goes. I'm very excited. Wasn't too nervous until we actually got to this point today. But I did my test of my pressure canner this morning and canned up a glass of water, or a jar of water, and it went okay. So we'll see how this goes. Thanks for being here with me today, and I will come back and talk with you after I've strained out all of the vegetable scraps and the bones and stuff.
Okay, so during this time lapse, I just wanted to pop in here to talk about a couple of things. So first off, you're gonna see that my head is getting cut off throughout a lot of this video. So I apologize for that. I am still working on learning how to navigate filming myself. I currently just use my phone stacked on top of a bunch of books. And so it's a little janky, but we're working with it, and hopefully the next video, my whole head will be in it. Also, I wanted to mention that you're gonna hear me saying throughout the video that I'm referencing the Ball Blue Book, and that is incorrect. You'll see later on in the video I realize that and make my correction. I don't know why I kept saying that. Additionally, when during this time lapse, you're gonna see me going through a bunch of different methods to try to figure out the right kind of method for me to strain out this chicken broth, because this is the first time that I have ever used a roaster pan like this. And so I think at one point you see me using a slotted spoon, and then I switched to a ladle, and then a glass measuring cup. So I'm really just trying to figure out what works best for me along the way. And you get to see all of the things that I try. And finally, I just wanted to say hi to my little kitten who pops in. She's not really much of a kitten, but she is one of my cats named Rhea. You'll see her during the time lapse. She pops her head in to check out what we're doing. So, yeah.
Okay, so I have filled 2 jars already. And I figured, honestly, it might be helpful to just kind of talk through the process of what I'm doing. So by no means do I want you to focus on my video as the end-all be-all video of how to can chicken broth. Definitely not right now, because like I said in my first video, I am new to all of this and still learning. And so I'm going by the things that I have been watching and reading and learning over the past, probably since the summer. So it's probably been about 6 months that I've been really invested and interested in canning my own food and preserving my own food and homesteading YouTube. And so I am following those videos of my favorite content creators. I've got the Ball Blue Book over there that I'm also following. And so I'll kind of talk through the process, but definitely if you want a more in-depth process and explanation, I will link some videos down below that I watched in preparation for this to kind of study up. And then I'm just going to talk through kind of what I'm doing here. And then also, I definitely really welcome anyone who has more experience than I, who has some thoughts or suggestions on how to make this process go smoother, or if you see anything that I do that maybe isn't the best, that would definitely be helpful information. So what I'm kind of doing is I'm taking my fine mesh strainer and I am putting it over the large glass measuring cup that I have here. That's actually an 8-cup measuring cup. And then I'm taking this other glass one that's only 2 cups and I'm scooping out the broth into this fine mesh strainer. And right now, because I've been doing it for a while and I've gotten down to the bottom of the roaster, there isn't much in weight, many chicken bones or vegetable scraps, many big things coming out of there anymore. You can see there's the occasional 1 or 2, but I'm just straining those out. And then once this gets full, I take the fine mesh strainer and I put it back over the roaster just so it can continue to drop any of those bigger pieces, can continue to drop the liquid back in there. And I'm gonna let this sit for a second and I'm gonna go over to the fat separator. Now, I don't know if this chicken broth just doesn't have a lot of fat in it. I definitely think I see a little layer there at the top, but I'm not sure if you're supposed to let it sit in the jar for a while. I know other people who don't use the fat separators. I've seen other folks on YouTube who just leave their roasters like out when it's winter to cool, or put it in the fridge to let that fat layer solidify so they can take it off. I don't have time for that today, and I wanted to just put it in, try out this fat separator, but I need to definitely do some more research on if you're supposed to let this sit or how you tell the fat apart. I think there's a small layer there. I don't know if you can even see that. But I am just letting it sit for a little bit so hopefully the fat collects, and then I pour it into the jar to fill it up. And I am doing quarts today. Also still learning the jar lingo. So I'm doing quarts and I'm filling them to about 1 inch of headspace because that is what everyone does and that is what is recommended in the guidelines. So I'm filling it just below that rim. And once it's full, I'm just moving it over here. And then I continue pouring it out of here until this is pretty empty, except I leave a little bit in there so that hopefully it's that fat layer that is staying in there. And so I'm just gonna continue to pour this out, get all that yummy goodness. And then, once that's pretty empty and there's just a little bit left in there, which I'm thinking is the fat layer, I am going to pour this chicken broth back in here and fill that back up. And in all reality, I'm dirtying quite a few dishes here. So that's why, we live and we learn, and I will hopefully be revamping the process to be as smooth as possible. But so that's kind of like one cycle, and then I take my bigger pieces from the strainer and I just moved the trash can over here so I can dump it in here really easily. And I'm just gonna keep going. I think we're at the point where I might try to tip the pot into there. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I don't make a big mess and it isn't too heavy. But yeah, so I'll check back in once these are all full and jarred up and we move on to the next step of wiping the rims down, putting them in the canner and actually pressure canning them. Okay, I was able to do it. So I was able to use my pot holders because it's still very hot, and pour all of the remaining broth in here. So we are gonna get this stuff strained out of here. And we're just gonna dump that in the trash. Throw that in there. Okay, and we're gonna keep going, folks. Okay, so I guess I can try to talk about a little bit about some of these steps and why we're doing what we're doing. So in all reality, from what I've learned on YouTube, I think it is completely okay for your broths to have some of the fat in there. I think it's okay to can the broth with the fat. And I just poured way too much of that in there. So maybe talking and doing at the same time isn't as easy as it looks. I think in all reality, you can have some of that fat in your jars. And I've seen folks who do that, and when they go to, after they take them out of the pressure canner, you can kind of see that fat layer or fat seal on the jars inside. And I think that's completely okay. Some people, I think, just prefer not to have the fat. I mostly use my chicken broth for soups, not just drinking. And so I don't really care if there's a lot of fat in there, but I figured I might as well try to strain some of it out. But because there's fat in here, we wanna, well, every time you do this, you wanna try to sterilize with some vinegar. And so when we get the vinegar out, we're gonna wipe down the rims and really make sure that there's no fat or any kind of stuff sitting on those, because then it can affect your seal and you might not get a great seal. So I'm gonna keep filling these up, and then I will come back to you when I either have something to say or when we go on to the next step. Okay, so what you saw me doing just now is using this tool that a lot of folks have. It acts as both a debubbler, so when you're canning things with solids in them, to move around the stuff in there to make sure that any air pockets get out. But this one is fun because it also has little steps on it for the different head spaces that you can at. So for like 1 inch of head space, you just kind of put it on the edge of the jar and have it go down until the top of your liquid. And the top of the liquid needs to be down there. So I don't think I have enough to fill another quart, but what I might do is just get out a pint and hopefully the rest of this will fill in there. And if it doesn't fit in there or fully fill it up, then what I will probably do is just keep it in the fridge, and I'll use it probably actually later today when we make the chicken soup that we're gonna can up. So I'm gonna fill up that last jar and then get my vinegar out, and I will come back to you when we are ready to do that step. So as you can see, we have a little bit left in there. It looks like there's some fat, but there's also some broth still in there. So actually what I'm gonna do is probably just put it in a jar and stick it in the refrigerator, and maybe I'll use it in the chicken soup. I actually don't know what people do, because I don't know that I've seen someone show the last part of this, of like what you do once you've drained out all the broth and where the fat goes, or how you know how much to leave. I know people save the leftover fat for cooking and different things when they let it solidify on the top, but I don't know about this one. So if any of you know or have used this before, maybe you can post that down in the comments, and that would be really helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna move this out of the way just for now. And I'm gonna grab our vinegar and a paper towel so we can wipe down the edges of these jars. And then we'll put the lids on, and then I'll move you over there and we will go put them in the pressure canner. And I actually might take a pause to check everything, the rules and guidelines, just to make sure I'm not missing any steps. Okay, so we've got our vinegar. We're gonna dip our paper towel in there, And we are just gonna wipe all these rims and make sure that they are clean. It's funny, I've started drinking kombucha recently and been learning all about that as well. So maybe I'll do a video in the future if I decide to start my own kombucha and start producing it. But this vinegar smells exactly like it, because when you make kombucha, you are actually fermenting it, and if you left it forever, it would turn into vinegar. And so it's really funny. This is reminding me of the kombucha I drank this morning. I'm gonna go dump the rest of this vinegar in the canner so that, I don't know what our water quality is like. I think it's fine because we live in a city, but I just don't want any mineral deposits on the jars when we're pressure canning. And so I'm gonna go throw this in there. And now we are gonna go ahead and put our lids on these jars and just center them. And one thing that I actually didn't know is that when you are canning, you wanna make sure that you never reuse these lids for canning. So once they have been used once, you don't wanna reuse them for canning. You can save them and you can reuse them to do other things, like if you wanna store like freeze-dried stuff in here or different herbs that are dried or different things like that. But you don't wanna reuse them for canning again. You can also reuse these if you open like some chicken broth and you use some of it and you don't use all of it and you want to put it back in the fridge, then having a ring on there is really nice to keep it tightly sealed while you store it in the fridge after it's opened. So I've got those lids on there, so I'm gonna go ahead and put these rings on these jars. So what you wanna do is do them to fingertip tight. And so I'm just gonna make sure that I'm not using my wrist, I'm just using my fingertips like that. And so you can see that just using my fingertips, I can't do it anymore. I had a little resistance and I just used my fingertips to tighten it a little bit more than that. So that is looking good. And let's get the rings on the rest of these guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and move you over there so you can watch me actually put these into the canner and see that whole process. So what we got out of this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarts, and we got 1 pint. So I'm actually really surprised by that. That roaster was a great idea. It made a lot, and I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to actually label these jars with a Sharpie, and then I'll move them over there real quickly, and I'll move you over there. We've got our water and our vinegar in the canner, and it is hot. I've just been getting it warm over medium-high heat, or medium heat on my stove. So I'm gonna use my handy-dandy jar grabber and bring those broths over here, and hopefully we can fit all of them in the canner. We'll see. I'm trying to make sure when I'm moving them over here, I don't remember exactly who said this or what, but there's a faint memory that lives in my head of trying to make sure that these are as steady as possible and you're not like tipping the jars this way and that, so the contents is like hitting the lid and moving around a lot. You want them to remain pretty stable, or so I think. So that's what I'm gonna do, because why not? Better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so that's good to know. It looks like my canner, and I probably could have found this in the operations manual, but can fit about 7 quarts in it if I wanted to. I've only got 6, and then I've got that 1 little pint that's in the middle, but I could have fit 7, so that's good to know. And good to know that one kind of go of broth, one kind of batch of broth in the roaster can completely fit in here. So that's really great to see. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna make sure that I am looking at my Fall Blue Book to make sure I'm following all the steps correctly. I did just do a test with this because I bought this pressure canner from someone on Facebook Marketplace recently. And everything worked out pretty well. And so I'm just gonna make sure I'm following the steps again, because since I'm recording on my phone, I don't have a way to pull up the YouTube video really easily and watch along with someone doing it. So it says that we are going to place our jars in the pressure canner. We are going to lock the lid and bring to a boil over medium-high heat. So on my pressure canner, I have a Presto, and I am going to get that on there just like that. So the handles are close by to each other, and over here it has an open and close. It tells you which way to go. And so you want to line that up with these arrows, because there's an arrow on this handle over here. So I'm going to slide it this way to get it closed. So now it is closed, and I'm going to turn up this temperature to a medium-high temperature. So I'm gonna do, mine says low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, high. So I'm gonna put it on about 8, and we're gonna let this just heat up farther. And then once it gets to a boil inside of there, we are going to watch this right here, this little vent, and it's going to produce a continuous stream of steam. And once we see that, and we're gonna see this pop up, or at least it did for me during the practice run, this little guy is gonna pop up and lock the lid in place so you can't remove it. And this is gonna be pushing out a continuous stream of steam. And once it does that, we let it do that for 10 minutes. So we start the timer. And then once it's done with that, we are going to put our weight on. So because of my elevation, I am going to can this chicken broth for 20 minutes, and I'm going to do it at 10 pounds of pressure. And actually, I am going to make sure and check that again just to make sure that that is correct. So I'm going to drop this on, and it is a weighted pressure gauge. Some people call it a jiggler, I think. And so if you put this on, it is gonna shake back and forth. I'll tell you about when we get to that step, what we're gonna do. I'll explain that a little bit. But yeah, so far so good. I'm really excited to see how this goes. Okay, so actually, I'm consulting my book, so I've been talking about this one, and I'm sure a lot of you already know about this from the other channels that you might watch, but this is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. So I'm just looking in here at their altitude adjustment chart for the weights and times, and so this says that if you're below 1,000 feet, you use 10 pounds of pressure, which is what I was talking about. However, where we live, I just checked with Siri to see what the altitude was, just to make sure. And we are actually at 1,100 something feet. And so the chart goes from 0 to 1,000, and then 1,001 to 2,000 feet in altitude. And so actually, I think we should be doing this at 15 pounds of pressure, because we're just barely above that 1,000, but I'm gonna go with better safe than sorry. So what that means is I am actually going to add this ring onto the weighted gauge to give it an extra 5 pounds of pressure. And so this is going to actually bring it up to that 15 pounds. And we're gonna put this on there when we are done. I'm glad I looked that up and made sure before we started canning our first actual food, because earlier all I had canned was a jar of water over here. And actually this lid was loose when I just touched it. So I hope I did all of those lids tight, or maybe that's just normal for it to be loose after it comes out. Again, if you have any ideas, leave them in the comments. I will also go and look up some different videos and things like that just to make sure, do my own research. But because I'm not going to be using this water that I used for the test can, I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, we'll do 15 pounds of pressure, and we will just see how that goes. We are still not venting the steam yet, and so I'll come back when we are. But I know from watching other videos that it often gets really loud when the canner is actually going. So the one last thing that I'll say before we cut to there, because I won't talk too much while we're doing that because it's loud and I don't know that my volume is going to be the best. So when it starts venting out the steam, what it's doing is getting out all of the air in the canner and it's building up that pressure. And so once it's that steady stream, all the air will be out once we let it go for 10 minutes. So after that 10 minutes of a steady stream of steam, I'm gonna toss this on here and then I'm gonna let it sit and we're going to play with the temperature, because what you want is you want this to just kind of rock back and forth like that. A lot of people that I've watched, including like Sutton's Days, describes it as a hula dance, a soft hula. And so you want it to just do a soft hula and just shake back and forth just gently. And so when I did my test, that was at about a 6 on my stove, is where it sat nicely and did that hula. And that hula just like lets out steam as you go. And yeah, so we're gonna put that on there, and then once it's at that nice little dance back and forth, then we can actually start our timer. And we are going to, because these are pint jars, we are gonna do it at 20 minutes. Or no, these are quart jars. So we're gonna do it at 25 minutes. And it's okay that there's a quart in there because, or a pint, because the pint only needs to go for 20, but it'll be fine if it goes for 25. It's only 5 minutes, so that'll be okay. And so then we'll set that timer, and I'll probably come back with you once we're done with the actual venting and timing and pressure canning. So I'll see you when I check in next. Okay, so I don't know if you can tell the difference. Oh yeah, you can definitely see that on camera. So right here, we've got the stream of steam coming out of the valve there, out of the vent, and it's pretty consistent, so I'm gonna start my timer for 10 minutes. This is also putting out quite a bit of steam, so that's the lock, and it did this during my test as well, and it should pop up in the 10 minutes that I'm doing the venting. But it also is leaking quite a bit of water. I don't know if you can see that. I think that's okay, but I'm gonna, like I said, do some more research, make sure that everything's going okay. And if you have any insights, let me know. Oh my gosh, am I gonna catch it on camera? I might be. It looks like it's about to pop up. But I'm gonna go ahead and set my kitchen timer for 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, I'm gonna, like I said, throw this weighted gauge on there for 15 pounds of pressure. Okay, so it is really loud right now, so hopefully you can still hear me. If not, maybe I'll try to figure out how to do a voiceover or something. So, when this was done doing its 10 minutes of steam, what I did is I added this 15-pound weighted pressure jiggler on here. And so that is exactly what we want it to be doing, or so I think, is we want it to just gently be shaking and rocking back and forth. So I've started my 25 minutes, and I'm keeping an eye on this to make sure that it stays just right there, that gentle rock back and forth. If it gets higher than that, I need to back down the temperature a little. If it gets lower than that, I need to up the temperature a little. Hopefully it doesn't do that, because if it gets really low or it gets really high, then I'll probably have to reset the timer, because you want to make sure it stays like this for the entire time. So far, I think we're at a perfect temperature, and this is actually a 7 on my stove. Whereas when I did the 10 pounds of pressure earlier with the water just to test it, it was good at 6. So that's something that I'm gonna note and think about in the future and just keep an eye on. But I think right about 7 is gonna be perfect for this. So I will check back in 25 minutes, or if something else happens. And we're back. So this has just finished up the 25 minutes that it needed to pressure can for. And so I turned off the heat, and I'm just gonna let it calm down and depressurize naturally, according to the instructions in the Blue Book. And so what that means is I'm gonna be looking for this jiggler to stop rocking back and forth and to just become still. And then once that becomes still, I'm also looking for this little vent. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but when it, so it popped up when we were raising the pressure, and so I'm looking for it to depressurize and for that to pop down as well. And once that, both of those things happen, I'm going to take the weighted gauge off, let it sit for 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to crack the lid away from me and let the steam out, and then I'm gonna let it just sit there for 10 minutes so the jars can come to room temperature, and then we'll take it out and we will follow the final steps of letting it sit. So I will come back to you when we are ready for this. Okay, so I have let this cool down and took my weight off when it depressurized, and then I let the lid, I undid it and let it just sit on the top, releasing some steam and stuff for a bit. Actually, for maybe about 30-45 minutes, because we ran to a piercing place, and you can hear all my lids popping, because I wanted to switch out my piercing to a ring. So you can hear all of them popping, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take them out of the pressure canner and just set them on this towel over here, and I'm going to let them sit and just cool, and then I believe tomorrow is when I'll be able to take off the rings and store them. So let's take them out, and then we'll check the seals as we go to see how we did for our first time ever pressure canning. Hopefully it turned out. Okay, so I'm going to be very careful not to tip this either way and just to keep it steady as I put it down on the towel. And I believe you want to put it on a towel or like a wood cutting board or something like that to let it cool down, just so it doesn't, so it can cool down properly and doesn't mess up. So you can see also, well, I don't know if you can see, but maybe if I can grab one and hold it up to you. You can see it kind of bubbling as I'm taking them out. And you can also see, I think that's some of the fat that's floating around there, but it's a nice dark color, which I have heard is because I used onion peels in my broth, and that's what helps it get that nice rich color. Also probably helps that I cooked it for like 40 hours, which I have never cooked broth for that long, so I'm very excited to see how it turns out. So they all look pretty good. They're all bubbling, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they did or didn't seal. Okay. And I'm gonna have to probably consult the little book here, or go watch some YouTube videos to check out and see, and make sure that I'm looking for the right things when I'm checking these and checking the seals. And then we've got our little baby pint. So I did use, when I was watching videos, some people talked about that you can write with a Sharpie on your jar lids ahead of time before you put them in the canner. But I did that, and actually I used a blue Sharpie, which maybe I shouldn't have used a blue Sharpie. Maybe it should have been black. But it looks like there's some like droplets where it kind of bled. I'll come grab the camera and show you that. So this is what I'm talking about, where it kind of bled, and it has little blue spots. I think that's probably fine, but I am gonna set you down for a second so we can check how these seals are doing. So I guess now what we're supposed to do is just let them sit here undisturbed for 24 hours, and then we'll come back and check and press down on the lids just to make sure they are concave, and then we'll go ahead and remove the rings and store it away if everything's sealed properly. So maybe I'll come back tomorrow and I will show you that as well. It's getting a little late here, it's about 6 p.m. and so I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go for it and also try to do the chicken soup recipe and pressure can that, or if I'm going to wait with that. Most of my veggies are already prepped, and the chicken is already prepped in the fridge, so it wouldn't take too long to throw together. But I also, maybe it would be better for me to wait just to make sure these sealed so I know that I am pressure canning correctly. So I'm gonna make a decision and then I'll come back to you to either show you what these are looking like tomorrow in 24 hours and wrap up the video, or I will see you in a second if I decide to do the chicken soup. Okay, so I did decide to make the chicken soup. Again, this recipe is directly out of the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. I think I've been saying the Blue Book, but that is not what it's called. This is a pretty standard recipe. I'm just following it exactly to the T, using some of the rotisserie chicken that I got the other day, which is how I got the bones for the bone broth. So you put 16 cups of chicken stock, 3 cups of cooked chicken, 1.5 cups of celery, 1.5 cups of carrot, and a cup of onions. And then you can season it however you like. So I did a double batch because I have a lot of chicken left over, and then I threw the rest in the freezer. And so because it is so late, I'm just going to go ahead and stop the video here. So I will come back with you tomorrow to show you how many cans of chicken broth we got and how those sealed, and how many cans of the chicken soup that we get. But anyways, thanks for sticking along so far, and I will check back in tomorrow. Okay, so it is a different day, and I wanted to follow up with you to show you how everything turned out. So, as you can see here, we've got the chicken soup that we canned up. I filled it to 1 inch of headspace, which should have been right here at the rim, but there's a little less liquid, but so far what I've been seeing on canning videos of soups, it seems like that's pretty normal when you're canning soups, but you can see all the yummy goodness in there, so very happy with that. And with the chicken soup, so we got 4 quarts of chicken soup and then only 2 pints. I originally was gonna get 4 pints, but 2 of them actually didn't seal. And what I think happened there is that when I was going through, because I was doing this at the end of the day, I think I was a bit tired and I forgot to wipe the rims with vinegar before I put the lids on. So I had put a couple of the lids on the jars and then remembered that I was being a little messy when I was filling them. And so I had to take them off, and then I tried to wipe down the jars and the rims with vinegar, but I don't think it sealed as well because of that. That's just my guess. But anyway, 4 quarts and 2 pints is still really good in my book. And then, in terms of the chicken broth, all of our chicken broths actually sealed, which I'm very happy about. And we got 6 quarts of chicken broth and 1 pint of chicken broth. And so you can see here's our broth. It's really dark and beautiful, and I know it's gonna be so good. So I just took all of the rings off and checked all the seals, and they should be all good to go. And so I'm gonna call our first ever canning projects a success, which I'm really excited about. And I'm gonna put these on our pantry shelves and try them one of these days here soon, because I cannot wait, and I'm so excited to see if they taste as good as everyone talks about. So I want to thank everyone for hanging out and watching this first video with me as I'm navigating this and trying to figure it out. There's definitely a lot more projects I want to do now going forward, considering I have this under my belt. And yeah, I hope you stick around as we hang out here and play around, but hopefully don't play around with our health. But until next time, stay grounded.